Entonces con nuestros paneles de esta hora. El cambio climático es evidente y eso impulsa a las transiciones energéticas. Irene Alfaro, directora gerente de ARPEL, moderará el panel sobre cambio climático, transiciones energéticas y el rol del sector petróleo y gas. Bienvenida, señora Alfaro. Le invito a subir al estrado y poder así presentar a su panel. La recibimos, por favor, con un fuerte aplauso. Gracias.
Bueno, muy buenos días a todos. Antes de comenzar, tengan en cuenta que este panel se desarrollará principalmente en inglés. Recuerden que contamos con servicio de interpretación simultánea y pueden solicitar los equipos en la entrada de la sala. On behalf of ARPEL, I thank all the audience and the panelists for this session entitled Call of Action, the role of the sector in the energy transition. In this panel, we will first talk about the importance and urgency of reducing global warming. To do this, we will start the session with an introductory presentation, pre-recorded by the Vice President of the IPCC, Ms. Thelma Cragg. She cannot join us in person due to the simultaneity of our conference with the most important global summit on climate change, the Conference of the Parties to the United Nations Framework of Climate Change, UNFCCC, that is COP27. Next, we will analyze some of the specific actions that companies in the sector are carrying out on their decarbonization pathway, for which the following panelists are joining us today. Sophie de Bras, she's Deputy Executive Director of IPECA. Vernon Paltou, the CEO of the National Energy Corporation in Trinidad and Tobago, and Silvina Oberti, Sustainability and Energy Transitions Manager of YPF. Also, this will be an interactive panel. This means that during its development, we will invite you to answer a series of questions through the conference mobile application, and we will analyze the corresponding results here with the panelists. Therefore, we kindly remind you to please download the application on your cell phones in case you still haven't done so. This will allow you, among many other functionalities, to interact during the panel by answering the questions that we will ask you in the voting section and directly posing your questions to the panelists in the questions to the speakers section. Now we can start with the first presentation, please.
Good day to all participants. And let me first thank ARPEL for having invited me to be here today and talk about climate change, energy transitions, and the role of the oil and gas sector. I will start my presentation by recalling the IPCC special report on global warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius that was released in October 2018 and that addressed the impacts of global warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels and related global greenhouse gas emission pathways that limit warming to that level at the end of the century. So, one of the main findings in that report was that limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels would require transformative systemic change integrated with sustainable development. Such change would require the upscaling and acceleration of the implementation of far-reaching, multi-level, and cross-sectoral climate mitigation, and also it would require addressing barriers. So while transitions in energy efficiency, carbon intensity of fuels, electrification, and land use are underway in various countries, limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius will require a greater scale and pace of change to transform energy, land, urban, and industrial systems. And this is globally. So the panel you see on the left shows an envelope with the assessed emission pathways that limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius until the end of the century. Those in blue represent pathways with no or limited temperature overshoot. That is, when there is a temporary exceedance of 1.5 degrees Celsius, say by around 0.1 degrees Celsius, while those in gray represent pathways with higher overshoot. So, to better contextualize energy transitions and the role of oil and gas sector, I refer to the Working Group 1 assessment of the climate response to 5 illustrative scenarios that cover the range of possible future development of anthropogenic drivers of climate change that were found in the literature. The emissions vary between the scenarios depending on the socio-economic assumptions, levels of climate mitigation, and others. These emission scenarios are shown in this slide, from very low greenhouse gas emissions at the bottom that you see in blue to very high emissions at the top that are shown in red. So this panel shows emission trajectories for carbon dioxide from all sectors from 2015 to 2100. And note that for the two emission scenarios with low and very low emissions, the CO2 emissions declined to net zero between 2050 and 2055 and are followed by varying levels of net negative CO2 emissions. The IPCC report also projects that unless rapid and deep reductions of CO2 and other greenhouse gas emissions occur, global warming of 1.5 or 2 degrees Celsius will be exceeded during the 21st century. So this on the left is the same slide as before, and on the right, you see a subset of 3 key non-CO2 drivers that are considered in the scenarios. From top to bottom, methane, nitrous dioxide, and sulfur dioxide, all represented in million tons per year. And under the low and very low emission scenarios, the ones that are shown on the top in blue, you can see that the methane emissions are projected to systematically decrease from the present emissions of near 400 million tons per year to around half by around 2050, reaching approximately 100 million tons per year by the end of the century. But where do we stand today in relation to the global greenhouse gas emissions? So according with the IPCC mitigation report, in 2019, the greenhouse gas emissions were 12% higher than those in 2010, totaling 59 billion tons of CO2 equivalent. And out of this total, as you can see in this slide in blue, 64% was associated with CO2 from fossil fuel and industry, 18% from methane, shown in red, and 11% from net CO2 from land use change and forestry, mainly deforestation, that is shown in orange. The report also concludes that the concentrations of CO2 methane and nitrous oxide in the atmosphere have increased to levels unprecedented in at least 800,000 years. There is high confidence that the current CO2 concentrations have not been experienced for at least 2 million years. So, if we focus now on the energy sector, this slide shows on the figure on the top in the left, the emission trend since 1990, and also drivers of global energy sector measured as primary energy supply. The greenhouse gas emissions reached 20 billion tons of CO2 equivalent per year in 2019, rising by 2.7% between 2015 and 2019, corresponding to an annual growth of 0.66%. Approximately 18% of energy supply emissions were from non-CO2 gases. Electricity and heat contributed approximately 69% of the total greenhouse gas emissions from energy supply, that also in 2019. And it's very interesting to note that despite the high penetration of solar photovoltaic and wind power, particularly in Asia and developed countries, the emissions continued to grow. Fugitive emissions from fossil fuel production, primarily methane, accounted for about 18% of sector supply emissions in 2019, with 13% or 2.6 billion tons of CO2 equivalent per year from oil and gas production, and 1.3 billion tons of CO2 equivalent per year to coal mining. Oil and gas operations produced 2.9 billion tons of CO2 equivalent per year in 2019, 82 million tons per year as methane, and this 2.9 is split roughly equally between oil and gas. And the report also points out that there remains a high degree of uncertainty in methane emissions estimates from oil and gas operations, despite the emergence of new data from satellites and other measurement campaigns. And according to a recent study, methane emissions are being underestimated by approximately 25 to 40%. This slide also shows on the bottom left the regional trends of greenhouse gas emissions from the global energy supply. The regions are presented in the figure as they appear below the figure, from bottom to up, where one can see the largest share from East Asia, followed by North America. Well, I already indicated the emission scenarios and particularly highlighted the need for rapid and deep emission reductions to limit global warming to levels aligned with the long-term temperature goals of the Paris Agreement. So, fossil fuels account for about 80% of primary energy today, and in the emission scenarios that limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, with limited or no overshoot, fossil energy provides between 59 and 69% of primary energy in 2030, and between 25 and 40% in 2050. And in those scenarios limiting likely warming to 2 degrees Celsius or below, fossil energy provides between 71 and 75% primary energy in 2030, and between 41 and 57% primary energy in 2050. So, the global fossil fuel use will need to decline substantially by 2050 to limit likely warming to 2 degrees Celsius or below, and it must decline substantially by 2030 to limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius with no or limited overshoot. fossil fuel use declines by between 52 and 73% from 2020 levels through 2050 to limit warming to 1.5 with no or limited overshoot, and between 23 and 51% reduction compared to 2020 levels to limit likely warming to 2 degrees Celsius. Well, this will require a significant reduction in coal, oil, and gas investments. The timeline for reducing production and usage varies across coal, oil, and gas due to their differing carbon intensities and also their different uses. And the report points out that failing to reduce global fossil fuel use below today's levels by 2030 will make it more challenging to limit likely warming to below 2 degrees Celsius. So limiting warming to these 1.5 or 2 degree levels will require substantial energy system changes over the next 30 years, including by reduced fossil fuel consumption, increased production from low and zero carbon energy sources, and increased use of electricity and alternative energy carriers. And the pathways following current NDCs, the nationally determined contributions, until 2030 do not show a significant reduction of coal, oil, and gas use compared to immediate action pathways. And finally, this is my last slide, and I would like to come back to the methane emissions. And I already said that these emissions from coal, oil, and gas in 2019 represented about 18% of the energy supply sector. Greenhouse gas emissions of 18% of energy supply sector greenhouse gas emissions and 90% of global energy supply non-CO2 emissions in 2019. Around 50% of the methane emitted from oil and gas infrastructure can be mitigated at net negative cost. That is, the market price of the recovered methane is higher than the mitigation costs. And finally, the IPCC report also says that even without a complete phase-out, 50 to 80% of methane emissions from coal, oil, and gas could be avoided with currently available technologies at less than $50 per ton of CO2 equivalent. So we see that there is a big challenge to the energy sector, with emission reductions in model pathways that limit warming to 1.5, projecting large reductions in the oil and gas sector in the near term. And I hope that my talk has highlighted the urgency of rapid and deep mitigation options in all sectors, but with the energy system transitions projected to have a big role to achieve the temperature goals of the Paris Agreement. So with that, I thank you very much for your attention, and thank you again.
Okay. Seems that we have a big challenge here. And please note that you can now start posing your questions to the panelists through the app, even to Thelma, because she offered to answer them by email afterwards, okay? Now, I would like to start with Sophie. Sophie, IPIECA membership includes companies from around the world. Can you please tell us what is the role of IPIECA and your members, and how do they work collaboratively on climate, energy transition, and the wider sustainability agenda?
Yes, sure. Oh, can you hear me? So let me just introduce IPIECA a little bit for those that don't know who we are. So we are the Global Oil and Gas Industry Association specifically focused on environmental and social issues. We've got a global membership, which covers about 50% of the oil and gas production, as well as a growing share of renewables, which reflects the changing portfolio of our membership. So our members include international companies, national companies, independents, and suppliers, and also a big set of association members, including the Brazilian Association, Colombian Association, and of course ARPEL from your region. And I think Brian did mention that we're very pleased that we've been working with ARPEL for about 30 years. So my contribution, therefore, will be a bit more global in nature, and hopefully this will resonate in your regions and countries in terms of the role of our sector in climate change and energy transition, and the call to scale up action for our industry. It's important, of course, to note, and I think this has been noted several times yesterday and today, that, of course, each country, each region have their own reality, and the pace at which they're going to move to energy transition will be different. So it was quite interesting to hear from IPCC on what the science and experts are telling us, and gave us a very clear call for action and a big challenge. So what we heard is climate is a global crisis. We're not on track to meeting the Paris Agreement, and she referred to the NDCs that are far from being on the right track, and we need to increase pace and scale of actions. She also referred to the fact that all sectors have a role to play, and in particular the oil and gas industry, which is good news. There is a need for finance for developing countries, and which is a key topic being discussed at COP27 this week and last week. And we need to look at climate and energy transition in collaboration with all sectors, and from a sustainable development angle. She specifically quoted transformative systemic change integrated with sustainable development, and I'll come back to that a little bit later. So this is a good transition to what IPICA and our members are doing on this area. So IPICA, we've got three main roles: convening the industry and between industry and stakeholders, knowledge sharing, and developing environmental and social good practice. Starting with knowledge sharing, through IPICA, our members involved in various groups do a lot of knowledge sharing, peer learning, a lot of peer pressure as well, on the full spectrum of the sustainability issues, and this is helping raising the bar for the industry. We also convene industry with key stakeholders. That helps us understand the issues facing our industry, what they mean for us, as well as getting constructive feedback, but also some criticism. We heard from Dente, who was one of our regular critics. And that helps getting our industry on its toes and make sure that we accelerate action. The second role that we play is around developing environmental and good practice for our industry. We've got about 300 of these developed over the last 49 years, and they're all done collaboratively by our members involved in the various groups. And in our groups, we've got the best experts in our industry on key issues: climate change, biodiversity, water management, human rights. One of our experts was actually sitting in the first panel from Ecopetrol. So it's good to know that we've got the experts. So climate and energy transition is actually addressed throughout our four strategic pillars: climate, environment, people, and sustainability. Just showing how all these issues are very interconnected. In our climate pillar, we now have a net zero emission task force, which is very active. Brian did mention that 35 of our company members out of 47 now have some sort of net zero commitment. We also deal with helping our members reduce greenhouse gas emissions from their operations. So that covers flaring, methane emissions, as well as emission from shipping and aviation, and of course improving energy efficiency. Through our environment pillar, we focus, in terms of energy transition and climate, we focus on natural climate solution as well as nature-based solution. The people pillar is now focusing very much on the just transition, and I'll tell you a little bit more on what we do on this. The last pillar is around sustainability. So a couple of work streams I wanted to mention is sustainability reporting. We talked about it quite a lot during the last panel, as well as the focus that we now have on increasing environmental and social performance in the supply chain. So this sustainability focus of IPICA shows how all these issues are interconnected, and through IPICA, our members are able to address collaboratively the very cross-cutting nature of climate and energy transition. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, we're also now looking at renewable. So we realize, actually through some of our stakeholders, that a lot of the environmental and social good practice that we've developed can be applicable to renewable businesses. And that includes wind, solar, and biofuels, which is the primary focus of our new Alternative Energy Task Force. Last of our role is convening industry and stakeholders. And IPICA's convening power is really thanks to our non-lobby status, I would say. That non-lobby status actually enables us to have trusted, impactful, and credible partnerships with a number of organizations. In particular, with the United Nations. You may or may not know that IPICA was actually established at the request of the United Nations Environment Programme, and since then we've actually got a dedicated UN global agreement or initiative associated with all our strategic pillars. So to give you a few examples of how we interface with the UN UNFCCC is one of the first one we engage with. We've got a bit of a delegation attending COP27. We organize side events, convene the industry with key stakeholders on some of the issues that are being negotiated, but also show that the oil and gas industry is a key part of the solution, and explain that our members are actually doing a lot. The second UN organization with whom we've worked in partnership for over 30 years is the International Maritime Organization, and one of the work streams we work on is around marine greenhouse gas emission. Another one around aviation emission is the International Civil Aviation Organization, which is the last UN organization that we obtain observer status. And last, and it was mentioned quite a lot in the first two panels today, is the link between the oil and gas industry and the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So I've mentioned two main global agreements, the Paris Agreement and the SDG, by achieving the SDG goals by 2030. There's another one that is really important to our industry and also linked to climate change. That's the Biodiversity COP. The COP15 will take place in December in Canada, and governments are negotiating a global biodiversity framework that will, and part of it is actually making the links between climate and biodiversity. And our members support all these agreements in some way or shape or form, and as Brian mentioned, it is part of our new membership principles, which are a new condition of membership. And I think that's it.
Thank you very much, Sophie. I would like to continue with Vernon. Vernon, as a major hydrocarbon-based economy and producer in the region, how is Trinidad and Tobago managing the transition to the low-carbon future?
So thanks, Irene, and thanks to Appel for the invitation to address you all today. So Trinidad and Tobago, as you indicated, has traditionally been a hydrocarbon-based economy. We started with petroleum production more than 100 years ago and transitioned to a gas-based economy in the late 90s, early 2000. And so we felt that we have already begun the transition, even from way back then, since gas has a lower carbon footprint than oil. And so we are using that as a platform in terms of building towards a gradual low carbon energy sector. And gas as the foundation allows us to utilize the resources, utilize the industry and the infrastructure that we have to transform into a sustainable energy industry, primarily on 3 pillars. The 3 pillars are energy efficiency, renewable energy, and decarbonization of the industry. And within those 3 pillars, there are short-term projects, and there are medium-term and longer-term projects. We have within our remit, that is a National Energy Corporation, and by extension the NGC, which we are fully owned subsidiary, extensive range of projects that fall within those categories. So starting with energy efficiency, which is the near term, we are looking at ways to reduce energy consumption in the country. Firstly, for example, by going into companies and doing audits and understanding where there's room for improved efficiency and using those energy savings to pay for the improved efficiency. In terms of near-term measures, we are looking at our methane emissions, that's our parent company, and methane reduction as specific short-term measures. And all of those falls within energy efficiency. From renewable energy, which falls into a parallel stream, we are developing a first utility scale renewable energy project at present. We expect a final investment decision before the end of this year for a 112 megawatt solar PV utility facility, which represents around 10% of our requirement at this point in time. And it's a major step because even though it's of our first utility scale project, it's probably one of the larger projects in the Caribbean. And so from that perspective, we think we are moving into immediate steps of decarbonization of our hydrocarbon industry. But on a grander scale and a larger context, we are actively developing a plan to transform the energy industry on a longer-term basis towards a green hydrogen economy. That obviously is a more complex and a more comprehensive offering, and we are currently working with a multilateral agency to develop that roadmap, which will become public by the government at the end of this month. And that essentially calls for production of green hydrogen to replace all of the energy requirements within our industry over a specific time period. That includes energy for power generation and raw material for our petrochemical industry that has traditionally been fed by gas, as well as transportation. So holistically, we are on a pathway towards decarbonizing our energy sector through short, medium, and long-term measures. And so, we feel confident that we are on the right track towards getting us to where we should be in terms of our commitments within the Paris Agreement.
Thank you, Vernon. Silvina, what are the main challenges for the sector in the Argentine context and the climate commitments made by the country?
Bueno, voy a volver un poco a lo que planteaba Sophie, ¿no? en su respuesta a la primera pregunta. Por supuesto que hay desafíos tecnológicos de inversión, de capacitación y recapacitación que son sumamente relevantes, pero tal vez el más importante de todos es el que hace a la cuestión central, ¿no? Y que es cómo hacemos para que estas transiciones, para que esta transición transite de una manera que nos permita que sean justas e inclusivas para todos, ¿no? Y eso en gran parte tiene que ver con la posibilidad de conciliar el impulso a la transformación del sistema energético, a la descarbonización de la economía, de una manera que concilie con el mantenimiento y con la ampliación de un acceso seguro y continuo para todos, para todas. Y en ese sentido me queda pensar básicamente en tres cuestiones asociadas al acceso que me parece que son centrales. La primera, por supuesto, cómo avanzamos en reducir la pobreza energética, que es un desafío diferencial para los distintos países, pero para todos significa un challenge, un desafío, y no solamente en términos de cómo hacemos para ampliar la cantidad de personas que tienen disponibilidad de energía eléctrica, sino también de fuentes más limpias de energía para cocción. En segundo lugar, cómo logramos acceso para los distintos países y las distintas regiones para el financiamiento que requiere la transición, no solo en términos de mitigación de emisiones, sino también en términos de adaptación al cambio climático. Los eventos climáticos extremos son una realidad que tienen un impacto significativo ya en todo el mundo, y es importante que podamos construir infraestructura resiliente para enfrentarlo. Y el tercero, y tal vez en el que quiero poner el acento hoy porque hace al rol de los hidrocarburos de manera central en este proceso, es cómo el acceso tiene que ver con que se tengan en cuenta las características de los contextos locales y particulares de cada uno de los países, ¿no? Como un poco lo que planteaba Sophie, cómo encaramos procesos heterogéneos con un mismo objetivo, ¿no? La descarbonización, el net zero a 2050, el cumplimiento de los compromisos de reducción de emisiones que ha tomado cada país, pero llevando adelante trayectorias que tengan características y una velocidad que permita poner en valor no solamente los puntos de partida que tiene cada país y los recursos disponibles, sino la contribución que hace cada uno de los países a las emisiones globales. No podemos perder de vista esa realidad y pienso, por supuesto, en Argentina, que tiene una participación menor al 1% de las emisiones de CO2 equivalente a nivel global, pero también en toda Latinoamérica, y pienso también en la importancia de que ese proceso sea compatible con las necesidades de desarrollo de cada uno de esos países, ¿no? Entonces, tal vez el desafío más importante y el contexto más relevante para avanzar en el rol de los hidrocarburos sea ese: cómo logramos avanzar en transiciones en plural, que permitan que cada una de las regiones y cada uno de los países lleve adelante con el mismo objetivo final el proceso que le permita generar más valor posible.
Thank you very much, Silvina. Now I would like to come again with Sophie, and I would like to ask you to please share some practical examples of how IPECA and its members contribute to the energy transition.
Okay, so we're facing two main challenges to achieve or deliver on net zero emissions and the Paris Agreement. The first one is really reducing emissions in our own operation, and the other one is reducing carbon intensity of the energy we sell through renewables. So just on the first one, in our own operation, starting with what IPICA does, we develop good practice and knowledge on various elements of the energy transition, low emission pathways. The first thing that we've just published a couple of months ago is the flaring management guidelines, which we did jointly with the International Association of Oil and Gas Producers and the Global Gas Flaring Initiative. We also work quite a lot with a number of other organizations promoting good practice and guidance around reducing methane emissions. We're just about to publish an update of our energy efficiency compendium, which is looking at various technologies to increase energy efficiency in our member companies. And that's also joined with IOGP. I've mentioned that we have quite a big focus under climate and fuels, centered around greenhouse gas emissions from aviation and shipping. Regarding carbon offsetting, which is not a license to emit, but offsetting residual emissions, we've got quite a lot of activities from our climate group. And the last one is around developing good practice around natural climate solution. And again, next week, we're going to be launching a NCS guidance together with the Oil and Gas Climate Initiative, OGCI. And after that, we'll be starting to work a little bit more on nature-based solution. So turning to some of the activities that our members are getting engaged related to their operation. The first one I wanted to mention is Chevron. They're using CCUS in their Gordon LNG facility in Australia. And it's the largest CCS system to capture emissions. And it's preventing millions of tons of greenhouse gas to being vented into the atmosphere. The second one is Equinor in Norway. They're replacing fossil fuel-based power supply with renewable to electrify their offshore installation, primarily through the use of offshore wind turbine. And the last one, around natural climate solution, BP partnered with an NGO called Pro Natura in Mexico to set up emissions reduction projects. And in 2020, they had 19 of these projects certified. Around reducing the carbon intensity of our operations and investment in renewable, as part of IPICA's new strategy that we launched in 2020, we've got a new vision that actually includes energy transition in the context of sustainable development. So we started to look at how we can support primarily our members around their renewable activities. Going to some of our member companies, Shell announced an ambition to produce 2 million tons of sustainable aviation fuels by 2025. Total Energies, their gross installed facility for renewable grew from 0.7 to 10 gigawatts in 2021. Today, 6 of our members have publicly announced investment in renewables to be installed by 2030 of 200 gigawatts. And to put this in perspective, that's 30 times more than what's currently installed in terms of renewable in Peru. There's also hydrogen. And the position of our member companies can vary. So some of them appear to skip blue hydrogens to go straight away to green hydrogen. As you can imagine, that's a majority of our European companies. In the US, there is a mix of green and blue hydrogen. The last topic I wanted to mention related to what IPICA and our members are doing around energy transition is the importance to share the economic and social benefits of the energy transition with workforce and local communities to create new and inclusive opportunities. And our companies are putting Just Transition plan in place in their priority facilities, helping workforce to develop new skills for the future energy system, taking a really inclusive approach that leaves no one behind. IPICA is also very active on the Just Transition over the last 18 months. We've got a very active task force that I think all our members contribute to, and we organize a lot of peer learning sessions on the implementation of Just Transition framework and indicators. We also do a very proactive stakeholder engagement. There's a lot of stakeholders involved in Just Transition, and this week we actually announced that IPICA is becoming an ally of the Council for Inclusive Capitalism. We also review and research on how to maintain the social dialogue and inclusive management of local communities to make sure we manage the impact from the energy transition. That's it.
That's impressive. Okay. Bernard, can you tell us if good fossil fuel production continue to play a role in the future energy plans of Trinidad and Tobago, given all the things that you mentioned before?
Certainly, Irene. I think from our perspective, fossil fuel, particularly gas, will be integral in terms of our future energy industry. All of the models by all of the international agencies have clearly demonstrated that natural gas will continue to be important and relevant part of the energy mix 2050 and beyond. I think Trinidad and Tobago shares that view, and we certainly intend to continue in terms of producing natural gas in particular, but at the same time developing the industry on a decarbonization pathway. So let me give you some specific examples. So currently our industry, particularly the petrochemical industry, requires 1.7 million tons of hydrogen annually. That's a significant amount on a global scale for our methanol and ammonia production in particular. That's about 2.5% of the global demand for hydrogen. And as you all know, we are a very tiny country, probably have 0.02% of the 8 billion people that we have in the world today. So it's significant, and we have to continue to supply hydrogen to that industry. So the intention is to develop lower carbon hydrogen input into that industry while, we use natural gas for different options. We have limited resources when it comes to natural gas, so we have to prioritize where it creates the best value. So from our perspective, we would be looking towards decarbonizing our hydrogen stream as quickly as possible, and that includes using carbon capture and storage as an option, so blue hydrogen as an interim, while we look at ways of improving efficiency, as I indicated earlier. But ultimately, we are very confident that natural gas in particular will feature significantly in our future while we move towards a low carbon future. So I think this goes into, plays into the trends that you're seeing globally with most of the progressive energy provinces, but we are at a position where we can more or less advance very quickly because of the dominance of our gas industry and how it is structured, it allows us the opportunity to go into a decarbonization pathway fairly faster than other territories may be able to. Okay.
Great, thank you. Now, Silvina, how do you think that the production of unconventional hydrocarbons and even offshore is inserted or articulated in this energy transition process?
Bueno, lo primero que quiero decir como contexto a lo que voy a responder al respecto es que Argentina tiene un compromiso de descarbonización bastante ambicioso, ¿no? La última NDC presentada a fines de 2020 lo que informa es que Argentina no superaría los 350 millones de toneladas de CO2 a 2030, lo cual implica respecto del business as usual para ese año una reducción de casi el 40%, entre el 37 y el 40%. Un objetivo que es bastante incluso más ambicioso que lo que había comprometido el país en 2016, con lo cual el desafío no es poco. Tal vez a nivel global no mueve demasiado el amperímetro por lo que yo comentaba antes de que tenemos una participación muy pequeña en la torta de emisiones GEI globales, pero sí es un desafío muy ambicioso para el país, que tiene además un desafío o un compromiso de trabajar de manera muy fuerte en adaptación al cambio climático y que ambos objetivos van a ir corriendo en paralelo. Y para poder lograr ese objetivo, definitivamente el sector de la energía y particularmente el oil and gas tiene un papel súper importante que jugar. En nuestro país, un poco más de la mitad de las emisiones de GEI vienen de la producción y el consumo de energías. Es un promedio un poco más bajo que en el resto del mundo, en gran parte debido a la constitución de la matriz primaria que tenemos, que está basada mayormente en gas natural y tiene muy poquito de carbón, un 2%, pero además porque tenemos una eficiencia en el consumo, tanto para la producción como para el uso domiciliario o comercial, bastante bueno. De todas maneras, el desafío para poder lograr estos objetivos no solamente va a tener que ver con el incremento de energías renovables. Argentina viene trabajando bastante en esto y tiene actualmente un promedio de un 13%, el promedio del año pasado, del 2021, de participación de las renovables en la matriz energética primaria, lo cual es significativamente mayor que lo que tenía hace 5 años, y el objetivo es llegar a un 20% de ese abastecimiento para 2030. En ese camino vamos, YPF está participando. Pero además va a tener que trabajar muy fuerte en lo que tiene que ver con la eficiencia, ¿no? Va a tener que lograr estándares para cumplir con esos objetivos de alrededor de un 30% de la mejora de la eficiencia, tanto en el uso para producción de energía como para el consumo de energía, donde por supuesto, como todos los que trabajamos en esta industria sabemos, está la gran cuestión, porque más del 90% de las emisiones vinculadas a la energía vienen del Scope 3, o sea, básicamente del uso de nuestros productos, ¿no? Y ahí tendremos que, o estamos trabajando desde la industria para potenciar nuestro rol, no solamente de diversificación del portafolio, para poner productos más bajos en carbono a disposición de los clientes, sino también en cómo mejoramos y hacemos más bajos en carbono los productos que ya tenemos, pensados básicamente para el transporte, ¿no? Para el sistema de transporte. En ese escenario, el oil and gas tiene un rol que jugar. Hay una ventana de oportunidad significativa que no solamente es en Argentina, es a nivel global. Vernon señalaba que aún a 2050 hay consumo proyectado, incluso en un escenario muy verde, de gran transformación, como es el escenario que describe la IEA en su Net Zero en su proyección de net zero. Todavía hay alrededor de un 20% de demanda o de participación de oil and gas en la matriz energética primaria, pero definitivamente va a tener que ser un oil and gas distinto, ¿no? Distinto sobre todo en su huella de carbono, un oil and gas con abatimiento, usado con fines básicamente petroquímicos, el oil estoy pensando, ¿no? Y seguramente con captura, ¿no? Pero si hoy pensáramos no solamente en dejar de producir, sino en dejar de explorar, muchos análisis de expertos muestran que no lograríamos cubrir la demanda de ese oil and gas ni siquiera en un escenario de net zero. Con lo cual, un oil and gas bajo en carbono sí sigue teniendo oportunidad de desarrollo. Y en ese sentido, el país tiene recursos de no convencionales y de offshore importantes, reservas ya aprobadas en el caso del no convencional importantes, y hacia ahí está empezando a girar el portafolio nacional y particularmente el portafolio de YPF. Y estos recursos son sumamente competitivos en este escenario, no solo porque han logrado precios de break-even para su exploración y producción que son comparables a los mejores desarrollos de Estados Unidos, sino porque su huella de carbono es bastante más baja que lo que es el promedio de los proyectos convencionales en el resto del mundo. Hoy el promedio de los kilos de CO2 equivalentes por barril de petróleo en el convencional está alrededor de 12 kilos, con algunos desarrollos que están en 16 o los que mejores performan en 9 kilos, como es el caso de Equinor, y los desarrollos en Argentina hoy de Vaca Muerta están en 15, 16 según los análisis que usa McKinsey. Y las compañías que tienen desarrollos más importantes, como es el caso de YPF, se han fijado objetivos que los llevan a lograr para 2030 casi el límite técnico del mejor benchmark, que está alrededor de unos 9-10 kilos por barril. Con lo cual, los no convencionales y el offshore también, que tiene una huella de carbono parecida, son competitivos, los vemos competitivos en ese escenario. La otra cuestión que me parece relevante destacar es, como en el resto del mundo, en la Argentina el oil and gas tiene una trayectoria muy significativa, en el caso de YPF más de 100 años, una trayectoria que le ha permitido adquirir competencias y capacidades que son sumamente relevantes para impulsar la transición. Es decir, no solamente la disponibilidad de recursos que pueden financiar parte de esta transición en función de lo que cada compañía considere que tiene que diversificar su portafolio para ser resiliente en nuevos negocios, sino porque además, si pensamos en lo que van a ser las nuevas oportunidades, ¿no? La generación de renovables, la ampliación de la infraestructura para todo lo que es el sistema de transporte eléctrico, la producción de hidrógeno las nuevas tecnologías vinculadas a la captura, no solo el storage, sino el reuso de carbono. La realidad es que la industria del oil and gas tiene las competencias básicas y el conocimiento y los recursos humanos adecuados para poder encarar esas transformaciones. Así que la oportunidad es grande.
Y muy buena, la verdad. Okay, let's go again with Sophie. How do you see the role of business associations like IPECA and of course ARPEL in guiding the oil and gas sector towards net zero emissions?
I think we have quite a big role to play. So as we've heard today, delivering the energy transition is very complex. It's going to require a very big transformative role of our industry, a lot of innovation, new ways to blend technologies together, new forms of collaboration and partnerships, and new value chains to deliver. So there's no single solution. Each country, company, assets will have its own ways of addressing this. But we can do this collectively, and we need to take action. The first big enabler, and this is where industry association can play a role, is around collaboration. So what we provide is an opportunity to get our member companies to talk to one another, learn from each other, but also to engage with our key stakeholders in energy transition and climate change. Because we're not going to achieve that alone, everyone knows that, and key actors need to work together. So a few examples of IPICA specific partnerships I wanted to mention. We support the World Bank Zero Flaring Initiative on methane. We're part of the partners in the methane guiding principles, and we also became a formal supporter of the OGCI-led Aiming for Zero initiative. Another really big partnership that we've been involved for 15, 20 years is the United Nations Environment Programme Partnership for Clean Fuels and Vehicle. And after 15 years of very hard work, this partnership achieved zero lead from fuels worldwide. So this was a big achievement. So associations like ARPEL, IPICA, and others have a key role to play in convening within our industry other sectors, in particular hard-to-abate sectors such as aviation or shipping, and also with key stakeholders. Another approach that is something that we offer as industry association, and we've got the same focus as ARPEL, is addressing these issues in a very holistic way. So IPICA is only focused on sustainability. We are the only global association doing this, and that enables our members to work on these issues. So just a couple of examples of sustainability in action. The first one was mentioned in the second panel, I think, is we developed a sustainability reporting guidance. We've been doing this for over 15 years. It's specific to the oil and gas industry. It's got 3 modules: climate, nature, and people. And we make sure that we update it because we know that investors are demanding more and more from our industry, and it's a very fast changing environment. The other one, and actually ARPEL has actually endorsed that along other associations. The SDGs that was mentioned quite a while ago, it's about making sure that climate is addressed through an SDG lens. It's really important to actually place the whole economic, social, and environmental impact of climate. So we produced an IPICA Atlas back in 2017, and then to follow from that, we did an actual roadmap on how IPICA and our sector can contribute and help governments achieve the SDG goals. And the roadmap includes, again, climate, nature, people, includes a number of actions for IPICA and for our member companies to help achieve the goals. And this is really serving as a framework for what IPICA will do in the short, medium, and long term. And again, IPICA, ARPEL has also developed a more regional focus SDG roadmap. So the last thing I wanted to mention is the new IPICA principles, which we launched in July this year. And it's really demonstrating a commitment from IPICA and our members to be leaders in sustainability, including a sustainable energy transition. And that really sets the bar for our members in particular. And they commit to the principles, and that shows that IPICA members are dedicated to continue to be leaders on sustainability. It demonstrates their commitment to these issues, and hopefully that will actually differentiate our members from the wider industry as key sustainability leaders. But going more broadly, the sustainability expectation that we place on our members, we actually hope it's going to have an impact on the wider industry and inspire a bit more action and a call to action to address these issues.
Thank you, Sophie. I would like to add to your comments that ARPEL has been addressing climate change and energy efficiency and energy transitions over the last year for more than 20 years. We have quite a long history of working together with IPECA also in all these very challenging topics for the industry. Specifically from ARPEL, we take care of the specific needs and challenges and opportunities that the companies in our region have. Okay, but we work very close with IPECA, with their global perspective, and we provide the regional one. Okay, so it is the same objective, but with a regional perspective. We focus a lot on collaborative working together among all the member companies in the region. Well, now I want to go again with Vernon. And I want to ask you, what role do you see for Trinidad and Tobago in the Caribbean and Latin American region in the transition towards a low carbon future?
And I think that's a relevant question, Irene. From Trinidad and Tobago, as I indicated previously, we have been a major player in the region with hydrocarbons over the years, and I think we are well positioned to leverage that in terms of driving the transition and the future towards a lower carbon industry, particularly in the Caribbean region. So from the perspective of a country, and I know President of NGC, Mr. Loquan, will probably speak about this later, gas is a transition fuel which can be utilized in the entire region, and NGC will be actively driving that agenda in the near and foreseeable future. But from a low carbon energy perspective, the study that will be published at the end of this month on the roadmap for green hydrogen for Trinidad and Tobago, and it contains data and analysis that illustrates that we would have the capacity to produce up to 4 million tons of green hydrogen in the next 40 years or so, within the next 40 years. As I indicated, Trinidad will utilize probably half of that, up to 2 million tons for our own industry. That's including the petrochemical power generation and even transportation. So we have the capacity to use our infrastructure and our existing LNG infrastructure to market, transport that green hydrogen throughout the region, and so be able to, create an industry that mirrors our LNG industry at present, that sees us exporting green hydrogen to our neighboring countries and even beyond that. I think, from a country perspective, we can demonstrate how to utilize the resources that we have to benefit not just us, but the region by extension. So from a regional perspective, I think we would be able to more or less provide some guidance and some focus in terms of creating a lower carbon future for the entire region. Okay.
Very clear. Thank you, Vernon. Well, Silvina, one last question. What do you think are the decarbonization commitments taken by YPF and its central lines of action to strengthen its resilience to climate change and those of the energy market globally?
Esta pregunta me encanta porque siempre que cuento algo de esto en algún espacio así público, participativo, termino teniendo intercambios y me llevo ideas de cosas, y estás haciendo esto y estás haciendo... Bueno, me parece interesante que podamos contar, ¿no? Y acá sí me gustaría enfocar en dos cosas. Por un lado, por supuesto, en las líneas de acción y los targets de descarbonización que tiene la compañía, pero también en el aspecto de la gobernanza, ¿no? y cómo la gestión de los riesgos del cambio climático y el foco en la resiliencia, en la competitividad del negocio en este contexto de cambio del mercado y transformación del sistema energético tiene lugar en la compañía dentro de su proceso central de construcción de la estrategia de negocio, ¿no? Y ahí, en términos de gobernanza, tal vez hay 3 puntos que me gustaría destacar. El primero es que la compañía toma el tema de la sustentabilidad, la transición energética y el cambio climático desde el espacio de mayor decisión de la compañía y un comité del board con miembros del directorio que llevan este tema. Hay una vicepresidencia de sustentabilidad y excelencia operacional que tiene a cargo también de poner en valor y levantar la mano este tema en el comité ejecutivo del top management. Yo tengo un área a cargo específico que trabaja de manera transversal estos temas, pero también hay un objetivo de sustentabilidad de compañía que tiene que forma parte de los 5 objetivos estratégicos de YPF y que tiene una medición anual con targets muy concretos dentro de los cuales están los objetivos de descarbonización incluidos. Hay incentivos alineados a estos no solamente para todos los empleados de la compañía, sino particularmente para el top management en términos de que el cumplimiento de estos objetivos tiene impacto en sus bonos de corto plazo, lo cual no es menor, y hay un foco en la gestión de riesgos del cambio climático incorporado a la gestión general de riesgos de la compañía, hasta ahora muy enfocado en las cuestiones de adaptación a los riesgos de eventos climáticos extremos, pero sí ya trabajando en un concepto más amplio de gestión de los riesgos con impacto financiero de mercados reputacionales tecnológicos de manera más amplia, ¿no? La última cosa es cómo trabajamos de manera transparente y colaborativa, es decir, cómo estamos formando parte de distintas instancias internacionales y nacionales, pero de colaboración con la industria o con otras compañías que permitan quebrar la curva de aprendizaje y compartir experiencias, y cómo estamos comprometidos con un reporting que sea consistente, que sea trazable y que sea muy transparente, ¿no? Y esto pensando no solamente en dar información correcta a todos los grupos de interés de la compañía, sino también pensando en cómo tener la mejor foto posible que nos permita construir una política, nutre también la mejora de la performance en la gestión, ¿no? Entonces, en este sentido, estamos trabajando no solamente con los lineamientos de reporting para el sector de IPIECA, sino con el GRI, los criterios de CDP y del TCFD, algunos estándares también como SASB vinculados a nuestra cotización en Estados Unidos, y todos los años desde 2018 además estamos haciendo la evaluación voluntaria de sustentabilidad corporativa que lleva adelante S&P para el Dow Jones Sustainability Index, ¿no? Eso nos da de alguna manera un input interno con el cual ir nutriendo nuestra gestión. Y en términos de iniciativas hay 3 ejes de trabajo más relevantes, con targets específicos asociados en términos de descarbonización que tiene la compañía. Uno es la diversificación del portafolio, el crecimiento rentable básicamente del negocio de energía eléctrica y de renovables, que arrancó por el año 2014, que llevó a que constituyéramos una empresa independiente que hoy tiene un socio minoritario que es YPF Luz. Y cómo trabaja en el mercado de las renovables, que de nacer en el 2014 hoy uno de los principales proveedores en Argentina de energía renovable, especialmente además para YPF. Eso le ha permitido a la compañía contar ya con hasta un 30% del total de la energía eléctrica que compre proveniente de fuentes renovables para operaciones propias. Cómo la compañía además invierte en lo que tiene que ver con I+D para nuevas energías y para nuevas soluciones energéticas, a través también de su compañía de tecnología que es ITEC, que está trabajando muy fuerte en el tema del hidrógeno, en el desarrollo de la economía del hidrógeno para el país, liderando un consorcio además que reúne actualmente más de 40 compañías en toda la Argentina y que articula con el sector público de manera muy fuerte. Y la tercera, y tal vez la más relevante para el día de hoy, es el foco en tener operaciones que sean no solamente de alto valor o que como parte de que sean de alto valor sean low carbon, ¿no? Entonces el foco en la descarbonización de las propias operaciones, con targets muy concretos, no solamente en términos de net zero de scope 1 y 2 para 2050, sino más cortos, que nos presenten desafíos que vayan tirando un poco de la cuerda, targets que van hacia 2026, consistentes con el último plan de negocio, y a 2030, que básicamente implican que vamos a bajar con línea de base en 2017 un 30% de la intensidad de emisiones de la compañía para 2030, que vamos a llegar a un zero flaring rutinario también para ese año y una reducción del 30% de nuestras emisiones de metano. Como targets intermedios a 2026 también tenemos targets específicos para el upstream y para el no convencional, pensando en el no convencional básicamente en el shale, en llevarlo a ese límite técnico del que hablábamos de 9-10 kilos de CO2 equivalente por barril para 2030, lo que entendemos que nos haría suficientemente competitivos, ¿no? Así que básicamente estamos trabajando en ese contexto, gobernanza, líneas concretas de acción con targets asociados que además muestran en cada uno de nuestros reportes el avance con esos compromisos tomados, también los desafíos, porque estamos aprendiendo y tenemos todavía mucho por delante. Y lo último que quiero decir es también transparentar los impactos y la contribución a objetivos de desarrollo sostenible que sean prioritarios en términos de materialidad para la compañía como parte de ese reporting anual también, ¿no?
That's outstanding. I really want to remark the governance aspect. This is critical. And this upper management commitment, it's a great example. The two companies that are here represented, we have the CEO here talking about energy transitions, and we have a very solid structure within YPF that supports all these aspects. That's really outstanding. I'm very happy to see that. Okay, well, now we'll proceed with the first question of the poll. So please open the app and be ready to respond in less than a minute the first question that will appear in the screen, or should appear now. There it is. You will all have 1 minute to answer. It is in the voting section in the app.
Usando el tuyo. Podía, ¿no? ¿Te molesta?
Okay. Now we have the results. They will, that's it. Okay, that's fortunate. There's hope. It is feasible, and I'm happy to see that it is the opinion of the majority here. The specific focus in this question has to do with a fair energy transition, this adjective, the fair one, okay? and that's critical specifically for our region. I want to share the opinion of the panelists here about this result. I would like to start with Sophie. What do you think about this?
I agree with you, it's good news. I'd quite like to understand why 36% thought it wasn't that important, but if we want to achieve a sustainable energy transition, it won't happen unless we bring everyone with us. And as you say, it should be fair, otherwise I don't think it will happen. In some countries, we don't use the word fair, we use the word just transition, which I did mention a little bit earlier. But we do need to make sure that we share the economic and social benefits of going into low carbon fuels. So, yes, companies, at least companies in the IPCA membership, they are putting in place just transition plans. They really try and sort of make sure their workforce is skilled to address the new forms of energy, and more importantly, bring communities around their facilities to make sure we leave no one behind. So, yeah, it's good.
Thank you, Sophie. Silvina, what do you think about this?
Me encanta que tengamos una expectativa positiva, ¿no? Que es la misma que tengo yo en función de lo que estoy viendo que pasa. Ahora, me parece que acá siempre, no sé, tal vez me equivoco, pero solemos pensar cuando respondemos estas preguntas más en términos de mitigación, ¿no? Y a mí también me gusta pensar en términos de adaptación. Y eso es lo que quiero rescatar. Pensemos no solamente en la reducción de emisiones, sino también en términos de cómo hacemos más resilientes nuestras economías, nuestras infraestructuras, la vida de nuestra gente, porque la realidad es que el impacto para América Latina de los eventos climáticos extremos está siendo y va a seguir siendo muy relevante. Entonces, gran parte de los fondos para no afectar la calidad de vida de nuestra gente, no afectar nuestras economías, va a tener que pasar por ahí. A mí me parece súper gráfico el término que usa la CEPAL para identificar este fenómeno, que es el de la doble asimetría, ¿no? América Latina, como todavía no terminó de desarrollarse y por la cantidad de la actividad industrial que tiene y la cantidad de población y demás, ha contribuido tal vez en una proporción menor a la generación de las emisiones que impulsaron y que siguen impulsando el calentamiento global, y al mismo tiempo va a ser una de las zonas del mundo, o está siendo una de las zonas del mundo que recibe el mayor impacto, ¿no? Entonces, me parece que el desafío significativo no es solamente en América Latina mitigar, sino que pensemos también, por supuesto, desde el sector público, pero desde las compañías, cómo nos adaptamos a ese nuevo escenario.
Definitely. What do you think, Vernon?
Yeah, I think that's a very positive result, and the only way this is going to work is for everyone to partner. It cannot be half of the society or three-quarter. And this is not about, what is good. This is about our very survival as, as a people. And so we have to do this together. And that's the only way it's going to work. So I'm happy to see the majority of participants feel that way. We just have to make sure that the others, understand how they can be part of, this transition. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be a very difficult road, but together we will get there.
Okay. Let's go now with the second one. In this case, you will have 2 minutes because there are more choices. Please, the slide. There it is. Okay, 2 minutes. You can only choose one option. Okay, there you go. We have the results there. So it seems that it's quite balanced. Sound policy regulatory frameworks is the winner, and all the others are quite balanced. So, Silvina, I want to start with you in this one. What do you think about these results?
Bueno, yo si hubiera tenido que elegir, probablemente hubiera puesto la implementación de impuestos al carbono, ¿no? que está directamente ligado a un contexto regulatorio positivo al respecto, ¿no? O sea, que se ocupe. Y pensaba en eso porque pensaba en un dato que leí hace poquito de un estudio de McKinsey, donde la conclusión a la que llega es que si pensamos en la resiliencia del portafolio de Oil and Gas a 2030, y pensamos en un precio de equilibrio de $60 el barril, hoy sin precio de carbono el 90% de los proyectos que están en desarrollo serían resilientes, pero si pusiéramos un precio de carbono de $100 el barril, solamente un 80% de esos proyectos serían resilientes, ¿no? Ahora, si pasamos, eso parece como que tener poco impacto, probablemente no sería un driver muy significativo. Ahora, si hacemos un análisis con un precio del barril de $30 y pensamos en toda la gama de grises de situaciones posibles en el medio, que es mucho más probable que un barril a 60, tendríamos que pensar que solamente un 25% de los proyectos existentes de petróleo son resilientes, y si le ponemos a esos $30 un precio de carbono de $100, solamente el 20%, o sea, 2 de cada 10 proyectos de oil and gas serían resilientes, ¿no? Con lo cual creo que ese puede ser un driver de aceleración muy significativo.
Thank you very much, Silvina. For the sake of saving time, because we are about to run out of time, I will go to the third one directly, to the third question. And now you will have 1 minute to answer again. There it is, the third question.
You're not seeing it.
No. En mi caso, la resiliencia a la edad. I have to be resilient to the age.
Okay. Well, that's balanced, definitely. Sophie, I will leave this to you. What do you think?
It's, can you hear me? Yeah, surprising, but not surprising to some aspects, I guess, which reflects the challenges with CCUS. The role of government is crucial, reflecting in particular on the cost. So they need to provide more incentive, policy support to facilitate the deployment of CCUS. And I think a recent study that I think IOGP conducted, and I can't remember the figure, looking at the NDCs that governments were putting together, there was a large majority of government that didn't mention CCUS as a primary technology. So hopefully that's going to grow, but I don't think it's there yet, and it needs to be accelerated if we want to meet the Paris Agreement. Again, I think industry association can play a role because I think someone mentioned earlier that the industry has the technology to develop CCUS. So in IPICA, we do a lot of convening and trying to sort of build a business case in terms of why CCUS is important. So yeah, it's disappointing but not surprising. There's a lot of challenges.
Yes, definitely. Okay, let's go to the last one. And for this fourth question, we'll have 2 minutes again because it's a multiple choice with more than 2 options. So let's go. There it is.
Irene, qué difícil elegir entre tus opciones. La persona en el centro, no hay otra. Hay que elegir.
Again, just one option. Okay. That's the right answer, I think. I'm glad to see this result. Environmental, okay. You're all good students. Okay, Vernon, what do you think about this?
So, Irene, I think this is, reflective of the reality. However, all of those factors are equally important in terms of drivers. But from a personal point of view, I think social for me is probably the critical factor for society in terms of driving this transition, because it's a cultural change in mindset as a people that we have to embrace. And Regardless, as I said, all of those factors are important, but we as individuals have to understand that we are doing this for ourselves, for our families, for our future generations. It is not something that, we choose to do, but it's something that we have to do in order to ensure sustainability of life as we know it. So for me, I'm just saying that on a personal view, I think social is probably the most important, but overall, they're all critical factors.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, well, now we have to finish. I want to apologize because we didn't have time to answer the questions that you placed to the panelists, but I promise that I will analyze them with the panelists and answer them by email afterwards, okay? So thank you very much to all of you who placed the questions through the app, all of you who participated in the poll, for all the attention, and I want to especially thank the three panelists here. And last but not least, I want to thank our climate change working group, who has a lot of relevance in the development of and the conception of this panel. And as I mentioned, we've worked a lot in ARPEL with this topic, okay? Thank you very much to